Okay, what? The clock is on a false start tonight. Shows you how this show's going to go. Welcome everybody to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host Allen Ulrich here with Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
I'll tell you what, Alan, it was a rough Easter weekend, but we somehow made it through intact. The old man here partially tore a quad muscle running across the yard yesterday, and that was one of the highlights of the last 4 days. But happy Easter to you and your family. Happy Easter to all you viewers out there.
Same with you, Bob. I'm sorry to hear about that. I learned a long time ago. I played a pickup game with my kids. My son, I think he was 12. He and his friends were either 11 or 12. And that's when I pretty much realized, yeah, I'm not built for a pickup game anymore. Those kids killed me. I thought I was in good shape, but I was not in good shape to play with 12-year-olds. Okay, so we're now 3 weeks from the draft, if my math is right. Yeah, the 27th in beautiful downtown Kansas City.
You've clearly never been to Kansas City.
Yeah, I don't think I have. I really haven't. And there's certain stadiums on my bucket list. Arrowhead is one of them. Lambeau is another. You know, I want to go to these big historical stadiums, but in Middle America. I have no desire to go to New York. I have no desire to go to LA and those stadiums. I have friends that are in Philadelphia, but I'm not too confident about going to, the Link wearing Saints paraphernalia. I'll go to the Steelers game. I can deal with Steeler fans, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But the Link, no, I'm not. My dad went to the Link, to the Vet, sorry, and he had a Saints jacket on, and he got some shit. And my dad's a big man. And same with, he went to Chicago, too, to Soldier Field, and it was rough. He said Giant Stadium was boring. There's no halftime entertainment or anything. In the old stadium out there in the Meadowlands, yeah, he says halftime happens and ain't nothing going on. There's no cheerleaders. There's no marching bands. It's just empty. And they just got guys going around getting beers and like that. He's like, it was terrible. It was a terrible stadium. So, yeah, son's correct. Okay, but it's the 27th. I know it's not the last weekend of April. So the show tonight is called "I Trade All My Tomorrows" because an old Willie Nelson song. Because like death and taxes, there's certain guarantees in life. And one of those guarantees is that Mickey Loomis is going to trade up in this draft. He's done it 9 times since 2011. And since 2003, I couldn't find the exact statistic, but I tried counting it, and I lost count at about 20 times he traded up. And I'm not just talking in the first round. I'm talking about trading up, period, in the draft. So it's pretty much a given they're not staying at 29, and it's also pretty much a given they aren't for players as assets. Going on trade next year, trade future assets from next year into the draft. So what I want to do tonight is kind of go through the Saints position by position, rather than names up there. Let's go through positions of areas where the Saints will probably trade up, kind of talking about them as terms of wants and needs, and how likely it is they're going to trade up. So let's start with quarterback. Do you think quarterback is a want or a need?
They, coming into the offseason, it was by far the biggest need for the team. But they signed, as you know, as everybody knows, they signed Derek Carr, and they view him as their quarterback for the immediate future. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. However, when a guy like Hendon Hooker is sitting could be sitting potentially at 29, and you have that almighty fifth-year option that you can pick up on a quarterback, no less. I think it would be awfully tempting. I absolutely do not think the quarterback is a need for this team, but I do believe that it could be a want. I don't think they trade up for any quarterback in the first round because, again, you have Derek Carr. But I think if a Hooker slips to 29, or latest rumors have Will Levis slip into the back of the half of the first round, if one of those two guys are there, I think they might pull that trigger. Even if they don't, I think that they will bring in a quarterback later in the draft. Probably won't be until day 3, where there's a couple intriguing prospects, developmental guys that could be on the board. But I don't think anybody should view the quarterback position as a need, and I feel very confident that the Saints don't view it as a need. If anything, it's a want.
Yeah, I'm much in the same boat. I look at it as a want. It's been 52 years. This will be 52 years since the last time they've drafted a quarterback in the first round, and that's
which is the only time they've ever drafted a quarterback in the first or second round.
Yeah. Archie Manning is the only quarterback they've ever taken in the first round or the second round. And there's some people I know that want to go 75 years, see if they can go that far without drafting a quarterback in the first round. And it's really amazing. We've gone through this before, how the Saints have gone so long without drafting a quarterback, and yet that's been a position of need for this team for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the best chance they could have taken one is probably in the 1980s, 80s, and then the early 90s. 2006, it was very likely they were going to take one if they didn't get Drew Brees.
Yeah.
And then in 2017, they were going to take, of course, as everyone knows now, Patrick Mahomes. So it's not like they've completely ignored the position, but I'm just like you. It's a want in my terms, because they did sign Derek Carr. I think they do look at someone later in the draft, probably third or fourth round. I'm guessing probably fourth round. Funny thing is, I ran a simulation this afternoon, simulated draft, and Hendon Hooker was available in the third round.
I see that a lot too on both simulated sites that I use. They really need to do a better job at updating that. I think it's safe to say that Hooker is going to be gone and no later than midway through the second round.
And to me, you're not trading up for a guy in the first round, not right now. You do that probably if you don't sign a Derek Carr, you sign a Baker Mayfield, or you sign a Jimmy Garoppolo. I think those are the kind of guys that you probably still look at taking a quarterback in the first round, maybe even trading a guy like that. That's not to say that Derek Carr is the answer, the future for the team, but he's Mr. Right Now, and he's the guy that's going to be starting for you, barring a disaster. He should be starting for you for at least the next 2 years. So I think the drive to get the franchise quarterback gets put on hold, so we go maybe 55 years before we take another one in the first round. It's just this is what this is what the Saints do. They've acquired more starters via trade and via free agency than anything else. And that's just the way it goes. The next one's far more interesting. Running back. Do you see this as a want or a need?
Alan, I see it as a need. And yeah, it's not as big a need because they did sign Jamal Williams, and I think Jamal is going to be a big part of the Saints offense, a bigger part than what I believe that a lot of people realize. But you're still looking at least a 6-game suspension for Alvin Kamara coming up, and literally no depth behind Williams and Kamara when they're available. Running backs get hurt. That's the nature of the beast. I mean, even Kamara, who, knock on wood, has stayed relatively healthy throughout his career, he gets nicked up for 2 or 3 games minimum every single year. And again, we've seen this problem with the Saints offense big time the last 2 years. I think one of the reasons why Pete Carmichael has not used Kamara more as a receiver and more out of the backfield to kind of draw defenses from sideline to sideline. Night, honey, I love you. It is because they didn't have a viable option at running back other than Kamara. Jamal Williams certainly gives you that, but again, you have I can't even say very little depth behind him. You have no depth behind them. Dwayne Washington, nothing more than a special teamer. Taysom Hill is your best short yardage option running the football right now. But Taysom's not a true running back. So, I still believe that this position is a need. I don't think they dress it in the first round unless they can get Robinson from Texas. But I do believe that they'll address it perhaps as early as day 2.
Nick Underhill and Mike Triplett had talked about this at length a few weeks ago. They said, well, the Saints are the kind of team that generally takes running backs between the 3rd and 5th rounds. Okay. And I get that, but it is equally true that they have traded up to get back enough to take Mark Ingram. They took Reggie Bush in the 1st round. They really like. I think they take around. They trade up to go get him, and I would describe it as a need because of the 6-game suspension of Kamara, and both and Williams are 28 years old. That is almost the cutoff point. 30 is usually the cutoff point for backs. And if Kamara is suspended 6 games, like we all expect him to be, what happens if Williams gets hurt? Gets a sprained knee, gets a bad toe, gets a twisted ankle, the dreaded high ankle sprain. Yeah, like you said, now we're looking at Washington. Now we're looking at Ingram. Now we're looking at just go through the guys they were bringing in, the Cardinals running back they brought in. You're talking about bringing in guys off the scrap heap, street free agents. We can always go back to undrafted free agent guys, but it's been a long time for since we had a Kerry Robinson or a Chris Ivory or a Pierre Thomas. It's been a long, long time since we had a guy who did that. We had guys that we thought were going to do that, Tavares Cadet. I know I should spit when I say that dude's name, but Tony Jones more recently. The kid they thought everybody thought was going to be the power back last year from Baylor. He just didn't. He's tearing up the XFL, but he's not. He didn't do anything in the NFL. So when I ran my simulation a few days ago, John Robinson had slipped all the way to 20 in the draft, and I traded up. I burned a pick and got him for Cowboys, and I took him. And it was fun. It was fun to move out like that. But I think Robinson's the kind of guy they trade up for. I don't see anybody else in this draft as a running back that's worth trading for. I mean, the next highest rated guy, consensus wise, is Gibbs from Alabama. And I would trade up for him. He's more of a 2nd round guy.
And honestly, as long as they do have Kamara, Gibbs is a poor man's Kamara. I believe that they, if they target a back in the draft, and I again, I thought coming into the offseason they were going to sign one in free agency and draft one. Obviously, I haven't changed my stance on that one bit. And I think that a guy that they go after in the draft is a guy that they feel can pick up consistent yards between the tackles, which has been their major problem in the last 2.5 seasons. And Gibbs, he's dynamic in space, heck of a pass catcher. But to me, he's not the kind of guy that you can draft and depend on between the tackles from day one.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, when we talk about taking it back in the first round, the Saints are never going to go back to the bell cow back. This is not Bum Phillips going to George Rogers. This is not even Jim Moore and later Jim Haslett with Ricky Williams and Deuce McAllister. Mm-hmm. They will always be in a rotation. He'd like to do it. Honestly, I think he'd like to do what the 49ers did back in their Super Bowl years. Have 3 backs that he can go to. Get a between the tackles kind of guy. You get a scat back kind of guy like a Kamara. And you also have this third guy who is kind of a Pierre Thomas looking guy. And you look at the 2009 Saints, you had that. You had Pierre Thomas, you had Reggie Bush, and you had Mike Bell as a closer. So you can your backs don't get worn out, and you can go to different guys. So yeah, I've got Robinson, a guy they would trade up for, but the rest of them, I know the Tulane guy is very popular. Spears, Zach Charbonnet, we talked about him before. Mm-hmm. I think you can get him in the second or third round. If you don't take one in the first round, I think it's still a need, but that's when you start looking at Spears, Sean Tucker, Zach Charbonnet, guys like that.
I love Chase Brown from Illinois. He's one of my guys too.
Yeah. I like Kenny McIntosh, but he's more of a Kamara kind of guy. Mm-hmm. He's somewhat between the tackles guy. The guy from Pitt, he's a fourth. They have in this book is a 4th round guy, but they actually compare him directly to Kamara. I cannot say this name.
Israel Abanikanda.
Abanikanda. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. I've watched a lot of tape on him. And I know the guide that you're looking at, and I'm usually a big fan of the Lindy's Football Draft Guide. I think the comparison they make to Kamara is frankly a lazy one. Honestly, I think Israel Abanikanda has a running style closer to Mark Ingram than he does Alvin Kamara. He is a between the tackles guy. Abanikanda gets nailed in the backfield when he tries to get too shifty. He's just not that nifty a guy. He needs to use his size better. But overall, his skill set, I put him right in the middle of the pack, with the Chase Brown, McIntosh, Charbonnet, and some of those other guys, Miller from TCU, Spears from Tulane. All those guys are going to start coming off the board really quickly. Probably starting early to midway through round 2 and extending into early day 3. All those guys are going to come off the board in a firestorm.
I agree. I kind of looked at him. I looked at this book I've got here is on sports. That's only 2 magazines actually I was able to find this year. There's very few of them that they still make. But I kind of look at him as more of a Pierre Thomas kind of guy, but a little bit tougher runner than Pierre. Mm-hmm. The thing about Pierre was he never took a direct hit. It was amazing to slide off of tackles and fall forward. And he used to describe his running style as ugly. I don't think he was ugly at all. I love watching him run. Yeah. But he was the guy that just knew how to make his body small, squeeze into those crevices, and get those extra yards just by leaning forward, and just remarkable hands, which they made the screen game work so well. But yeah, I think once you get past, Robinson, after that, now you're looking at late day 2, early day 3 for running backs here. Wide receiver, we got Chris Olave last year. Rashid Shaheed was a surprise, and Michael Thomas is back at least for a year if he can stay healthy. After that's a pretty huge drop off as far as quality receivers. And yeah, the Saints signed, I don't remember his name anymore. Saints signed a guy late last month.
But, yeah, Brian Edwards.
Brian Edwards, thank you. Yeah, I kept wanting to say Balin Edwards, and I knew that wasn't right. But yeah, I mean, would you describe this position now, since we did take Olave in the first round last year, and we traded up to get him, would you consider this a want or a need?
I consider this a need too, but only for a certain type of receiver. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Jordan Addison. I love Najigba from Ohio State. I love both those guys. But in my opinion, the Saints already have a version of them, a better version of them in Chris Olave. If the Saints target a receiver, especially if it's early. Now, and I know Alan agrees with me on this. Folks, once you get into the 4th round, day 3 of picks, teams are going literally best available player on the board. You can't draft a player in any day 3 round saying, I expect this guy's going to fill this need. No, the NFL teams, NFL executives, coaches, they don't think that way, because the odds, the further you get in the draft, the odds of a player making a team, let alone making a contribution, gets slimmer and slimmer. So you go for best available in those rounds. So, you really target, and Alan said this several times before, your first 3 rounds are guys that you expect to start relatively quickly, or at least make a major contribution. So when we talk want or need, we're pretty much talking in those in the first 2 days of the draft. But anyway, I digress. I think it's a need for the Saints, but only in a certain type of receiver, and that is a physical guy that's going to be able to work the intermediate parts of the field and be sort of a security blanket for Derek Carr. Michael Thomas is back, and if he stays healthy, that's huge. They signed Brian Edwards specifically to back up Michael Thomas, but Brian Edwards has not done, and I like Edwards, but Brian Edwards has not done this yet in his career. He's been a bit role player at best. So in my opinion, it's a need for another physical target. And if the Saints do draft a wide out in the first couple of rounds, it is going to be that kind of guy. Forget the mock drafts that have them taking Zay Flowers from Boston College or Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee. Both very, very good wide receivers, but that doesn't fit what the Saints need to fill for this offense. A Quentin Johnson from TCU, a Cedric Tillman from Tennessee in day 2, a Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State, day 2, early day 3. Those are the kind of guys, wide outs that I see the Saints drafting if they target one early.
I'm the same way, and we talked about this last week when I picked Mingo from Ole Miss. Same kind of guy, big physical receiver. And that's somebody who's going to be a day 3 pick, and it just depends on how you have this guy rated. The receiver for LSU. Let's talk about a couple of local kids. The receiver for LSU, Booty, kind of put together a pretty crappy pro day. I don't know if you saw this or not.
I heard.
I mean, the routes they showed him running, they pretty much compared it to, when you had your third plate of Christmas dinner, and now you're going to go outside and run routes with the kids, throwing you the football. I mean, it was pretty sloppy, pretty bad. Um, how do you think this affects his draft stock?
I think it affects it a great deal. Because I believe that some teams, if not most, had some red flags on this kid anyway, because he's always been a little bit flaky through college. Inconsistent production on the field, off the field. He's going to sit out. He's not going to sit out. He's going to declare for the draft. No, he's coming back. No, wait a minute. He's going to declare for the draft. Maybe he's going to, rumors a year or so ago, maybe he's going to transfer. Maybe he's not. If I was a coach or I was an executive, those kind of stories built up. These weren't isolated stories. You put them all together, and I would have a lot of questions about this kid's focus and this kid's motivation. And then you go out, and like you said, this is pro day. This is something that you're supposed to be preparing for. This isn't a big surprise. That comes up on the calendar or anything. You have months to prepare for this. Kids sit out their bowl games specifically to start early prep on scouting, combine, and pro days, and to come out and turn in a dud like that. And I heard he was a little bit overweight too, or at least from what some scouts expected. Again, that's poor motivation. That's poor discipline. So he was already. He's flashed some great talent on the field, but I think he was already at best a late day 2 stretch. I think now he might not even be drafted. I think that's how much this affected his draft stock.
I didn't want to really speak ill of him because I know the LSU fans get bent out of shape. I'm glad you said what you said, Anna, but this guy's in for a rude awakening. I think he slides all the way to day 3. You're going to see things that are LSU fans pushing for him. Gets in the 4th and 5th and 6th round. It's not a wasted pick, and you get a guy from LSU. But I'm with you. I think he is that far that he is a guy you're really going to have to. He's going to have to nail personal interviews with teams and convince them he's a guy that's going to be motivated to play, because otherwise all there for is a paycheck, and he's just going to show up in big games. He won't show up in regular games, and you can't count on him. You're not going to be able to trust him because he'll show flashes, and he kind of feels like, hey, I'm an LSU receiver, just like Jordan Jarrett's like Lamar Chase, just like, I'm one of these guys. No, you're not. You don't show it though. We talked before the Saints were interested in Xavier Hutchinson. He's a late round guy. This is a name I think fans just ought to scribble and pencil just to worry. But Dante Demas Jr. from Maryland.
Yes.
He's 22 years old, 215. He tore his ACL in 2021. Great last year, and we all know it takes about a year to recover this. But I see a little bit of Marcus Colston in him as far as being a big-bodied receiver who attacks the ball with his it depends on his medicals now. I mean, we all know about what happens when you take players who tore ACLs in college. But that's somebody I'm watching for day 3. 4th and 5th round, I'm looking to see if the Saints will get him, because like you said, they start grabbing receiver that I watch for. Just where he goes from here. I can go through quite a few receivers where the Saints took a shot at somebody like Chase Lyman, I think the guy's name was. So who was it had cadaver ACLs in there? I want to say it was Chase Lyman. I think that's who his name was.
That sounds right.
He was like the
it sounds right.
yeah, 2007 draft class. Um, yeah, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's a steal! It's a great player." And he really never recovered from that torn ACL. I think in fact he tore it in the uh, in the preseason too. He tore the other one.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying, but that's a guy that you look at, seems to fit the profile. Somebody that you probably can look at in the third, day three, fourth, fifth pick.
I love both
Tight
Maryland
end.
receivers. I love both Maryland receivers. I agree what you said with what you said about Demas, Jarrett. Now he's a Chris Olave type of player. Raheem Jarrett is, but he'd be a great value too. And both of those guys are in. You might see a team take a flyer on one of these two guys. Late in day three or day two, excuse me. But you're right; they have fourth, fifth round, written all over them. But either one, for different reasons, would be good value. So so I agree with you.
Um, so tight end. We talked a lot about this last week. Want or need?
Tight ends a want. Um, And again, just like wide receiver, it's if they bring in a tight end within the first 3 rounds, and I know several national mock drafts have them doing so, but if they bring in a tight end the first 3 rounds, it's going to be an inline guy. It's not going to be a guy like Dalton Kincaid or some of those other pure pass catchers. I believe you had Darnell Washington, the kid from Georgia, going in your second or third round. That's going to be the kind of guy that they target. And I also say want because Juwan Johnson has developed very, very well as a pass catcher. Which sort of eliminates a need to a certain degree at that position. That's A. B. Look back, and I keep teasing this, because I don't want to bore people with the stats that I have, but it's so very rare that a rookie tight end, even a first rounder, has an immediate impact as a rookie. That that's why you don't see a lot of tight ends drafted in the first round, because NFL teams know this, and realize. Every single year we think that there are going to be 2 or 3 tight ends that could be drafted in the first round, and they slip until the second or third. And once they start coming off the board, then you start seeing NFL teams grab them. That's because they all have the same realization, is that statistically their chances of hitting it big as a rookie are relatively minor. So, teams draft for an eye for the future too. But a lot of these teams with their first round draft picks, they need an immediate contributor. So again, guys like Michael Mayer from Notre Dame, who's a solid prospect, Laporta from Iowa, Washington from Georgia, they're all good inline guys. The kid from Oregon State, Musgrave, he's kind of a bulked up receiver, but he's a willing blocker. The tight end class, just like the running back class, is fairly deep. But I think that if the Saints take one, it won't be until probably they might reach one in the second. But again, that's only because they see a specific guy that they like, and someone else started the run on tight ends a little bit sooner. So I think it's a want.
Yeah, every year I beat the drum. We don't have a tight end. I beat the drum to get a tight end. That's just me. That's like fetish position. If I'm going to go there, I wanted Greg Olson in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted Mark Andrews in 2014, 2015. I think it might have been 2018. Now I think about it. But he ended up going to Baltimore. So there's always I wanted Jimmy Graham when we got him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always beating the tight end drum, because when you get a good tight, it just opens your offense up so much.
Oh yeah.
And you saw that with Jimmy Graham. You see that in Kansas City with Travis Kelce. You see that in San Francisco, with Kittle when he's healthy. Gronkowski when he's there, what he did for Tom Brady in New England.
Yeah.
You know,
Goddard in
those.
Philadelphia opens things up for those two wideouts. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree with what you're saying. And I actually kind of tie these receiver and tight end positions together in a way this year.
mhm,
Because both you and I agreed that if the Saints target a wideout, it's going to be a physical guy to work the middle of the field. But really, you could combine this and say, that we think that the Saints are going to go after a physical pass catcher. If they see a
yeah,
big tight end, that can work the middle of the field, and have upside as a blocker too, they may very well shoot for that over a physical wideout. But either way, they're going to target a guy that can work the middle of the field for Derek Carr.
absolutely, absolutely. So I always have it as a need, but I'm with you. I'm gonna categorize this as a want, and I don't think they trade up for anybody. I think they take him if he's the best available player on the board.
Mm-hmm.
They are interested in a tight end, but they're not going to go out of their way to go get one.
Right.
There are other positions that are much more important to them. I still say watch Washington, see where he goes, because he seems to hit all the check marks for a Dennis Allen kind of offense.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's going to be a Travis Kelce or a Kittle or a Graham, Gronkowski, anyone like that, but he could be a poor man's Mark Bavaro. But in my mind, he's primarily there as a run blocker, and they want to get rid. I think they're just tired of Adam Trautman. Honestly, I think they're extremely disappointed in his development, and they're ready to move on from him.
Yeah.
So they can get a blocking tight end that can go catch passes from in the seam, from inline blocking, not lining up outside the numbers like how they'll probably put Juwan Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
That's more what they're looking for. Juwan Johnson, they like his progression, and if they can go to two tight ends, they would be ecstatic.
Oh yeah.
Because they would love to run 12 personnel a lot as opposed to 11 personnel. Two tight ends, single back. We're gonna power run you guys. What is it, that Dennis Allen offense? That's probably more of a topic for after the draft, but I'm going to say that Dennis Allen offense is more like what Jim Moore dreamed his offense could have been.
Yeah.
A much more efficient passing game, but built around running first. But he is willing to take more deep shots than Moore ever was. He's probably just a lot better. A Dennis Allen offense is going to be, you trust your defense and special teams to be an equal part of the team and help you win games, as opposed to a Sean Payton offense, which is, I don't give a damn what you think you can do. I'm going to try and hang 40 points on everybody. And if we have to win a shootout, let's go for it. I'm ready. And that's the kind of offense he ran, and that's not going to be what Dennis Allen does. Dennis Allen is going to kick more field goals and trust his defense to win close games. It's stressful, and it gets frustrating because you think they can't win shootouts, but he's going to trust his defense more, and that takes us to the next group, offensive line. I'm throwing it all together because I don't want to go into tackles, centers, and guards, because a lot of guards that we draft originally start off as tackles or centers. So would you describe the offensive line as a need or a want right now?
And I've gotten into it with some people on social media, surprisingly in a civil way. This draft coverage has been relatively civil through social media thus far, believe it or not. But I don't think offensive line is in nearly the dire straits that some believe. You have Trevor Penning, who is basically coming off a redshirt year. He's going to be your left tackle. Fingers crossed that he develops, but the Saints spent a first-round pick on him because they believed that he would. If he does, then you all of a sudden have James Hurst, a very capable tackle, as your backup interior guy, where he's better suited anyway for when Andrus Peat goes down. You have Eric McCoy, very, very solid. You have Cesar Ruiz, who had his best of his 3 seasons by far. But then you look a little bit closer. Andrus Peat, contract year, always injured. Cesar Ruiz, they have not yet picked up a 5th-year option on him. Trevor Penning, still relative unknown. Ryan Ramczyk, knee issues. How bad are they? Is it degenerative? So, I mean, I believe that offensive line, skilled offensive linemen are always a need. If you have a chance to get them, you get them. But I agree with you, Alan. I don't think the Saints are going in here thinking we need a tackle or we need a guard, but they are watching some linemen very, very closely. Their type of linemen, the type of guys who can play multiple positions or have played multiple positions, or a collegiate tackle that they think they can move inside to guard. So I do believe that they draft one. So I guess from everything I said, you could say that it's a minor need because they are aware of some of the potential issues.
I'm just counting the years. I think Ruiz is in a contract year if they don't pick up that 5th-year option. Am I
2020 he was drafted, right? So 2021, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah, because you would have to pay, the NFL rules, you have to pick up the 5th-year option as they go into the 3rd year or 4th year of their deal. So they have 1 more year under contract if you don't pick up a 5th. They're a lame duck year if you don't pick up that 5th.
Yeah. Okay. So so they got to make a decision on Ruiz. I'm going to say it's a need, but not up immediate need in the first round. I think it's a need because of the question marks that we just talked about. Ramczyk didn't practice on Wednesdays all year last year. How bad is that knee, and how much further is this going to affect him? Yeah, Ruiz, the news came out today. He can finally wear 2 pairs of tennis shoes. He doesn't have to wear just 1 shoe over and over again.
Right.
So Ruiz is still a question mark. Penning is a question mark because he's been injured and he's very raw. So you don't know. We got him penciled in as a starter, but this is going to be a critical training camp. And of course, like you said, Peat always hurt. Contract year. This is probably the last year we'll see Andrus Peat in the Saints uniform. And the question is, how many games will he play? Over under is probably 7.
Yeah.
So in a 17-game season. So yeah, I mean. So there are question marks on the team. On paper, it looks good, but we're only a couple injuries away from seeing Calvin Throckmorton, Landon Young, those guys playing, which is, again, why I want this tight end. Washington has that 3rd blocker. If you have to kick someone inside, or you need someone to help Penning or help Ramczyk, you kind of need this. So anyway, I think this is a position they start looking at early in day 2, possibly 2nd round, possibly 3rd round. It depends on what happens with the next position, defensive line. Want or need?
It's a need. It's a need inside, and currently a want on the edge. Long-term need, but it's not an immediate need on the edge. But I think pretty much everybody has the Saints taking a defensive lineman in the 1st or 2nd round, some both, on the defensive line in this draft. I personally think they're going to come out of with their first 3 picks. I believe, and again, a lot depends on the draft board. It always does. But I think they're going to come out with a defensive tackle and a defensive end. So yeah, I do think that it's a need. Defensive tackles. I love what they did in free agency, but that there's still nothing to that depth chart. And I think that was done intentionally. I think they target a tackle early. And you have a 34-year-old Cam Jordan coming into his 13th year. You lost regardless of whether you're happy or not about it, you lost Marcus Davenport this offseason. Peyton Turner has done absolutely nothing to this point. So, yeah, I think you got to address the edge position too.
Yeah, I'm the same way. This is a need, and this is a position I think the Saints are going to trade up to go get. Because what did Mike Detillier say? You want 2 kinds of players in the first round. You want a guy who is going to score a lot of points for you on offense, and you want a guy who's going to put that other guy on his butt.
Mm-hmm.
So that quarterback and pass rusher or defensive end. Okay.
Yep.
Like you said, Peyton Turner hasn't shown anything yet as a player. He can't even stay on the field. And there were a couple of games where he was a healthy scratch.
That's what concerned me right there.
Yep. That's a critical miss if you did this in the draft. And people weren't happy about him getting drafted anyway. We all felt, and I know you did too, that this was a reach. This is a 3rd round kind of guy that you took in the first. So, I'm a little leery. I've got a picture of the guy who I think the Saints would probably trade up for, the defensive end from Iowa, but not trade up high. I think if he, in fact, I know that the Saints, they're going to try and trade up, but they probably won't be able to trade up any higher than 20.
Yeah, and even that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, simply because point-wise, moving up 9 slots is about 150 to 200 points. Okay, but for a team to slide down 9 slots in a draft like this, the draft has to fall a certain way for that team.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I want to see happen in this draft is I want 5 quarterbacks to go in the top 20 picks.
Yeah.
Because if that happens, then the 29th pick becomes more valuable.
Yep.
And it costs you less to move up if you're going to move up.
Yep. 5 quarterbacks, 3 or 4 cornerbacks, which some are calling for, 2 or 3 wide receivers, which some are calling for. All positions where we don't think the Saints are going to address in the first round. That would be great.
Yeah. Yep. That's kind of how I feel with this. Is if the draft falls the way we want it to, then the Saints are in a good position to let the draft come to them. However, if only 3 quarterbacks go and there's a run on defensive tackles and defensive ends, I think that's when the Saints kind of hit that panic button and start burning a lot of assets to move up. So defensive line is the position I'm going to say that the Saints trade up, that's where they're going to trade up. And I think they're going to at least burn that 2nd round pick they picked up from Denver next year. I can see them doing that.
Yeah, I can too. I think, and you may have said the same thing at the beginning of the show. I think if a player like Bijan Robinson falls to 20 or 22, you might see a trade up for that specific player. But as far as position goes, and this could be tackle or end. If they trade up for a position, I 100% agree with you. It's going to be for a defensive lineman. Now tackle, I consider, based off of what I've seen, The players that I've watched, I think tackle is a lot deeper in this draft than defensive end. But that's all the more reason to think that if the Saints are going into this draft thinking we need an edge rusher fairly early, and like you said, they start coming off the board, that's when you see, that's when you're going to see a move up for a Van Ness from Iowa, Miles Murphy from Clemson, the kid from Northwestern, or even the kid from Kansas State, one of those guys. So yeah, I could, if they trade up, it's going to be for a defensive lineman.
Yeah. So if they take, if you have a choice between defensive end and defensive tackle in this draft at 29 or in the 20s, what do you think they're going to prioritize first, tackle or edge rusher?
Honestly, I think it would be edge, only because, again, from the Bob Rose scouting book, I don't know what Mickey Loomis and Jeff Ireland have, but from the Bob Rose scouting book, if I'm making the pick, I think that I could get a quality defensive tackle well into the third round, and I do not feel that way about a defensive end in this draft. There are a few I really like, but defensive tackles. The defensive tackles, I can run a list down of like 8 or 9 that I would say, you know what, if I get him for my team, I'm going to be really happy. I can only go like 3 or 4 deep at defensive end personally. I know defensive end and edge rusher are 2 separate categories in a way. Because the Saints always, some people want to link the Saints to Will McDonald, or if they could move up to get the kid from Georgia. Those are 3-4 outside linebackers. They do not fit what Dennis Allen or what Joe Woods wants to do defensively. They need bigger, athletic guys. That's the Saints' prototype defensive end. So if you're folks, if you're looking through your own draft book right now, look for the bigger defensive ends. The Isaiah Foskey's, Miles Murphy, the other guy, some of the other guys that we've mentioned. Those are the guys who the Saints go after. And that's where, like I said, I only see like 3 or 4 that I personally would spend a first or a second round pick on.
Yeah, I'm looking at guys with extremely long arms.
Yes.
Because that is probably the telltale sign on the tape. They like tall, rangy, explosive players off the edge. You want to know why they gave up 2 first rounds for Marcus Davenport. It checks every one of those boxes. Converted receiver. He was a tall, rangy guy with extremely long arms. Same thing with Peyton Turner. High RAS score, long arms, incredibly tall player. If anything, Cam Jordan is the odd player that they drafted because he really doesn't check those kind of boxes. But the big box, of course, he checked was desire and son of a former player.
That's big too. Well, that was big with Sean Payton. I don't know if it is with Dennis Allen. But then, and the other thing, all those boxes that you just named, add another one for defensive end. It got to go at least 265. So you're talking about an athletic freak, that can blaze a 4.5, 4.6, long arms, rangy, and go on like 6'4", 6'5", and 265 plus. There aren't many human beings on the face of the earth that fit all those boxes.
No, they're not. They're not. So, and I agree with you. I think they can get a defensive tackle. They've got 2 guys who can play now.
Yes.
Okay. So the need for a defensive tackle, and a lot of people have us taking Cansey out of Pittsburgh. I like Brees out of Clemson. I've run through many simulated drafts, and it's hard to get Brees. It's almost impossible. He doesn't get past Jacksonville, for example. So I think in the real world, he's going to go even higher. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go to Dallas even at 20. So, as much as Dallas needs a running back too. But I think defensive end, that is going to be the first round pick. I think defensive end is where they trade up. It's just a question of what they burn, how far up they go to get that guy. And my personal opinion, as of April 11th, 2023, I think Van Ness is going to be the pick if they can get him, which is going to be really weird because he wasn't even a starter and he's going to be a first
Yeah.
round pick. But he is showing the kind of growth and development that players are, I mean, that all personnel scouts are saying this is going to be a guy to watch. This is going to be a guy who's going to be very different as a pro. He's only 21 years old.
Yep.
So he's a young too. So yeah, that's gonna be my pick to see if they can get him. I'm not gonna be disappointed if they don't get him. Don't take that stand, but I think that is the guy they've got circled on their board right now. Um, I knew I was gonna say something, and it's Calvin. I know, but that's just a gut feeling right now, just based on what I'm reading, the kind of vibes I'm getting about this team right now. Um, um, well, that's all right. I wouldn't mind getting him later in day 3. I like this, and maybe Army kid. I don't know why, but there's something about him I like.
Yeah, I like him, and I like
But we'll
Keon
see.
White from Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm. Defensive tackle, we've talked about that before too. You had a couple people that you really liked. One, I cannot think of his name now. It starts with an I.
Siaki Ika from Baylor.
That's it. Yeah, the Baylor kid. I know that was one you
Yeah,
had on
I love
your.
him. I love Mozzie Smith. Gervon Dexter, Keanu Benton, Benton from Wisconsin, Dexter from Florida. Those are 2 guys you could probably get in round 3. One of them might even slip into round 4. Later in the draft, day 3, kids like Zach Pickens from South Carolina, Carl Brooks from Bowling Green, Keandre Coburn from Texas. You want to talk about a gargantuan run stopper? The man looks like Malcolm Brown's older brother when he plays football. So yeah, I mean, guys like that. Like I said, in my opinion, you can get quality defensive tackles later.
You know who Coburn reminds me of, and this isn't a fair comparison, but he reminds me of the Big Wiggle from the back in the 2000 Saints team, defensive tackle we got from San Diego, the Chargers, and they were still the San Diego Chargers in 2000. But he reminds me of him, just size wise. He plays a lot better than he did, but yeah, he is a mammoth guy. He is. If the Saints are running a 3-4 defense, you would have his picture on your wall as that is my nose tackle right there.
Yeah,
right there. That's the space heater. So that's somebody I'm looking for. Again, day 2. We get defensive tackle. There's somebody that you're gonna look for. And they in the draft books they call him a 2-down player, but I think he, in condition wise, he gets off the college diet and gets on an NFL diet. He probably could be a 3-down guy. Yeah. And we need a fat guy to get a football, catch the football. We need a fat guy running with the football. I like him a lot. So linebacker. This is another position I consider more of an extreme want because the depth scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
The starters even scare me.
Yeah.
Because I thought DeMario Davis, found the fountain of youth late. Beginning of the season, I'm long.
Sorry, you're freezing. If you asked me something, I missed it.
Okay. Running all over the place, looked good. Was a really machine when he was. Davis came on as a season developer, outside or inside. You can score a need.
I consider linebacker a want, and I'm like you. I always want a linebacker. Um, And the kind of
Mm-hmm.
guy I always want is the kind of guy who the Saints do target. A guy that can make plays from sideline to sideline, be a sneaky good blitzer, and can cover backs and or tight ends all over the field. It's not a guy that I think that they would address in the first round or probably even the second. And in recent years, other than Pete Werner, in recent years they haven't addressed the position early. I love DeMarco Jackson, but admittedly he's unproven. So if you go by that logic that he's unproven, Zach Bond is not a fit, has never been a fit for this defense. Then I agree with you, Alan. Depth scares the hell out of me, which is why I want to see it. Matt, I believe you mentioned Jack Campbell. Campbell is going to be long gone by the time the Saints want to address a linebacker. They're just not going to do it that early. Maybe a guy like Dorian Williams, one of my favorite players in the draft. Maybe Henley from Washington State is another guy to keep an eye on. DeMarvion Overshone from Texas has a tremendous amount of range. Shaka Hayward from Duke. He's just one of those guys that are always around a football. All of those guys are probably going to be early day 3 picks. So again, once you get into that range, you're just if you're the Saints or any other NFL team, you're looking at all right. Who is left? Who's the best player on our board, regardless of position? So because of that, linebacker is a want, not a need.
Yeah, the problem with linebackers today is I find a lot of them are about the size of safeties. They're not big safeties. They're not. And this is one of the reasons why the 3-4 defense fell out of style. You don't have the Vaughn Johnsons anymore in college football. It's hard to find those guys. What you end up getting is undersized guys or guys who are tall and rangy, but are really light.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Andre Carter. He played more of a stand-up linebacker, but he's 6'6", so it's a little bit too tall for a linebacker in the NFL. But I'm just going through some of these guys, just looking at them, and you've got a couple guys in here like Nick Hampton from Appalachian State. Now, granted, it's Appalachian State; it's not a big school, but 6'2", 225. That's a safety.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what we used to consider safeties. They've got some 250 and 255 pounders in there, but for the most part, you've got really undersized linebackers coming out in the NFL, and I think that's one of the reasons why Matt likes Jack Campbell so much. Aside from him being a good player, that's traditional linebacker size, 6'4", 250. We talk about Overshone, who I like a lot, from Texas, 6'3", 20. So he's a lighter size guy. He's probably more of a weak linebacker. He's a guy you probably are going to, if you were to draft him, you're grooming him behind Demario Davis to eventually take over Davis' position. So if you're looking for that strong side linebacker, it's going to be a little bit hard to find that guy right now. A guy who is big enough that can go out and cover the tight end and is fast enough that can run sideline to sideline and be good run support and shed blockers when the tight end is coming at you as a blocker. So I consider it a need, but a high need. I think they have to come out of this draft with at least one linebacker, preferably not a linebacker who's had knee injuries. But, they need a linebacker in this draft, and I think they do address that. Henley is another interesting player, but again, he's 6'1", 220. So again, that's almost safety size.
Yeah.
So, speaking of safeties and cornerbacks, defensive backs, as we're already over an hour here. Defensive backs. high priority, low priority, want, need. I know cornerbacks and safety are different, but
it's a low priority. It's a want. At
yeah.
cornerback, you got Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, and Paulson Adebo on the roster. It's starting to look like Bradley Roby is going to come back, unless one of those big three get traded. And I'm not speculating. I'm just saying, if it happens, or unless it happens, that's not a need at that position. Safety, I actually thought was going to be a need. I considered it a need coming into the offseason. Because frankly, I thought the team would part ways with either Matthew or May. They didn't. Matter of fact, they reworked contracts to bring them back. Now they need depth here. Safety depth is very, very important. But they brought in a truckload of guys to try out for that. Amagi, Jonathan Abram, PJ Williams is always a candidate to be brought back. And they, I forget the name off the top of my head, the former Lonnie Johnson. They brought him too. So they addressed the depth chart. So I don't think if they bring in a defensive back at either position, it's going to be on day 3, because again, that happens to be the best player on their board in that particular round.
Yeah, you're probably looking at, if you bring a cornerback in, you're looking for an inside guy. You could probably maybe double as a kick returner. Because the 3 starters that you named really are outside corners. So you're really relying on Roby more as an inside guy, the slot guy. I'm with you. I think they need to look at a safety. I know they got Smoke Monday from the undrafted pool from last year. They got a few other, players on the roster that, we can see what they can do. I'm going back to the old well that we got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from. Rashid Torrance is somebody I'm going to keep an eye on.
I like him.
3 pick. He's raw. He needs more development, more refinement, but I think he'd be a good special teams guy. Kind of a ball hawk. Reminds me a lot of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, he does.
Not the trash talking, but just the way he plays and seems to make some plays. So that's a guy I'm watching for day 3, 5th round. That's about where he needs to go. So I'm kind of looking at that guy, but I'm not looking really. I'd kind of be surprised to bring in a corner. I think they could probably get one in the undrafted free agent, market after the draft. It'd have to be really somebody who just blows them away. Like there's no way they thought this guy would be available, say in the 4th round. He was projected as a high 2nd, low 1st round pick, and for whatever reason, he's sliding on the board.
Right, like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was a couple years ago.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, yes, yeah. So, last bit, specialists. We don't talk about long snappers here, but we'll talk about punters and kickers. And the only reason I'm bringing those guys up because both of them had down years last year. Now they're both guys that are undrafted players. The Saints acquire. Outside of, we've had a couple good punters we've drafted, but outside really of Thomas Morstead, we haven't had much luck drafting kickers. Right. I can't think of a good kicker we drafted since Morton Anderson. Do you take a kicker in this draft? Do you consider him a want or a need?
I think I fully expect them to bring in competition for both Blake Gillikin and Will Lutz, but I don't think through the draft. I think, and we only see 1-2 kickers tops every year get drafted throughout the league, and there's a reason that the entire league puts less premium on that. They put less premium in getting them, but they really, 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 really want them when they don't have them. But you will see the Saints bring in both kickers and punters, undrafted guys, to bring in competition for Gillikin and Lutz. And I think Gillikin especially could be a guy that could be unseated. but I would be very, very surprised, if the Saints, I would be very, very surprised if the Saints drafted a kicker at all. And I would be flat out dumbfounded if they drafted a punter.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same way. I, I do remember when they drafted Morstead, fans were really mad because they spent a 5th-round pick on him.
Yeah.
He turned out to be a great player because, of course, his rookie year, he was both kickoff specialist and punter, and he had never kicked off before. And he was remarkably consistent as a punter. But I'm the same way. I just don't see they've got too many needs in this team to really go out there and go to waste a pick on a place kicker or a punter. I think that there's enough talent in the undrafted free agent market to go get one. And there's no kicker on there. I'm just looking at going, this guy's really good, and he's probably
right.
I just don't see that. College kicking too, because of the hash marks, they're kicking so wide of the goalpost that it's hard to sit there and go, yeah, that's the guy I got to have. We don't talk about this person. Yeah, we really don't talk about him. He's jailed now where he belongs. He got arrested actually doing he's in prison for a pyramid scheme he was running. Yeah, Russell Ulrich Slavin, he was an on kicker, which I had forgotten until I saw some of the games on YouTube, which no one kicks anymore. But yeah, he was drafted because the Saints tried to do 2 for 1. They wanted a punter and a kicker, place kicker, and that never works. But they did it, and the thing about it was this team, as the 78 season, if you watch the highlights of the 78 season, you can see the reason why they considered it a high priority. They went through 4 kickers that year, and they weren't very consistent. I think we had both Mickemeyer kickers too. Mickemeyer, for those of you who are under 30, Mickemeyer was synonymous with kicking in the 70s as the Grammaticas were with kickers in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Grammaticas and the Zendejas.
Zendejas is the other one. Yeah, Zendejas was the other name. It was it's like everybody they ran through all the teams. So I get it, but there was too many needs this team needed. They needed offensive tackles. They needed defensive tackles. They needed linebackers. They needed cornerbacks, and they wasted on a damn kicker. So it looks like you and I kind of agree, though, that it looks like defensive line, defensive tackle, defensive end. Those are the priorities. Then after that is running back, linebacker, receiver / tight end. That's kind of how you and I see this draft playing out. Now you realize, of course, they're going to take a cornerback in the first round now. Just
right.
We start all this. I think that's where we're going to go with this. I really do. So I guess the big thing in next week what we could talk about is the other teams in the NFC South. It seems like it's coming closer. The Panthers are leaning towards Young. Today was the story that came out. They're also looking at, they're still, do they take CJ Stroud? What do the Bucks do? Where are they going with their picks? Because they've really done nothing in free agency, and they got a lot of cap problems too. Then the Falcons just made a trade with the Lions, and they took the former 3rd overall pick. I can't think of his last name. Okuda. Okuda, yeah, Okuda Matata. But yeah, they took Okuda. So the Falcons are trying to build a defense.
Yeah.
Um, do they take a quarterback in this draft? Because you can't tell me they were this sold on the kid from Cincinnati who started for them last year.
Ritter. Yeah.
Ritter. You can't tell me they're sold on him completely, that they're going to trust him to run the team for the whole season. I think quarterback is still an option for them.
Mm-hmm.
Receiver is an option for them. Running back, offensive lineman. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah. So, yes, thank you, Kevin. So, I mean, I think that's a good topic for next week. Well, we could just go through the NFC South and where do we think these guys are going. They had grades come out, and we're going to talk about this. For some reason, they graded the Saints lowest, even lower than the Bucks. I just, oh man, don't put that on us. Don't put that on me. I don't want to see that. I think
No.
Ralph Marlboro had the same thing. He traded to number 10 to take Jalen Carter. Listen, I like Jalen Carter after the national championship game. I like Jalen Carter going into this draft. Going to free agency, I should say. But he put on too much weight at combine. He's now being lower than 10. I'm not going to do anything for it. I'm not going to show you anything unless you're in the top 10 of the draft. No thanks. His attitude sucks. And I don't need another Jonathan Sullivan in this team. I really don't want to live through that. So, Jalen Carter, I'll take you if you're in the second or third round. I'm not taking you in the first right now. I'm just not doing it. Bob, what do you have coming up for the Bayou Blitz?
I think Brendan and I are going to cover, some of the talk about some of the draft profiles that I have published already on the Saints News Network. Y'all could go to Saints News Network or SI.com if you want to look at any of those. I've been doing those for pretty solid about 2.5 weeks now. We'll continue doing them daily, 1 or 2 daily through the draft. So we'll talk about some of the draft profiles I've already published, give you a sneak peek on some of the ones I'm working on and I'm going to publish. Because these black circles are bigger than normal because I watch way too much film. And I don't have Mike Detillier. I've always done my own work, but I don't have Mike Detillier to help me out anymore. So I'm sleeping even less now. We're going to talk about individual draft prospects. Some of the prospects that the national media has tried to link to New Orleans, why it's a fit or why it wouldn't be a fit. Those kind of topics tomorrow on the Bayou Blitz at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern.
I saw your comment to Mike yesterday about his draft guide, and I miss it a lot too. I'll tell you what, Mike Detillier sold me on his draft guide. I was already reading it before, but he sold me on the draft guide when he had a write-up on David Onyemata. And you literally could not even find Onyemata if you Googled him.
No.
On his pro prospects or anything like that. And he had a nice write-up on him. The average draft guide that came out in magazine format, and I'm going back to when all of them are putting out draft guides, Street and Smith and all those guys, 200 players, 275 players, some bragged 300 players. Mike Detillier had over 400 to 500 players he profiled, plus all the local kids. There's a guy from UL. He just got, unfortunately, he's a receiver, and he got in a car accident, Jefferson, today. He was probably a low 6th, 7th round pick before this accident. It's pretty much going to guarantee he's going to be an undrafted free agent. But Detillier would have a write up on him and where he thought he would go. And I love that stuff. I have about 4 or 5 draft of his draft guides still, and don't ask me why I say these damn things. My wife thinks I'm crazy. I still have the Ricky Williams draft guides, so you're going back to 1999. Um, but yeah, those things really, his guide was one of my favorites because when the undrafted free agent list came out for the Saints,
Yep.
I'm looking through his book. He's got write ups on almost every single player they're bringing in as undrafted free agents.
Yep.
That's how thorough that man was.
And I've tried to model my articles after him. Mike has been a big influence in my career. I've tried to model my draft profiles because I legitimately watch film on these guys to come up with my own opinion, and I watch no less than 3 or 4 games from two different seasons if it's possible. For these guys, because I don't just watch highlights. I don't just watch certain clip. I want to watch what they do snap after snap, situation after situation, and against different opponents in different conditions. And when I write up these guys, I write up where they came from, a sentence or two, how they did in college, especially their last 2 years, if applicable, what they did in scouting combine and or pro day, comparatively to other people at their position, and then what their fit is, what I viewed as their strengths and weaknesses, and what their fits are for specifically the New Orleans Saints. And that's exactly what you will find Mike Detillier and in his write-ups, like you said, Alan, on every single prospect. So the guys that I do, the guys that I write up on, I have notes on tons of guys that I won't have time to publish profiles on, but that I want to at least have a couple notes on draft night, because it's inevitable. I could publish, and I'm probably on target to do this. I could publish articles of 40 different guys. The Saints won't draft a one of them. That's just the way it is every single year. Last year I got lucky. Yeah. I think I 4 of the 5 guys they drafted, I had published pieces on. So I felt pretty good about that last year.
I got to the point where I pretty much could predict the kind of guys that Peyton was going to draft. And now that he's gone, this will be Dennis Allen's first real draft. I'm not going to count last year, even though he was named the head coach, because the scouting and the coaching staff were really Peyton's guys, and he didn't replace the scouts. But I mean, they were scouting and writing their reports up as if Peyton was making the selections.
Yeah.
I think this year you're getting finally Dennis Allen's imprint on that staff and on this scouting department. So you're going to be looking for the kind of players to run what Allen wants to do. So I think that's why you're going to see, I would not be surprised to see the first 3 picks be, defensive end, offensive lineman, defensive tackle. His mentality, them going running back, receiver, tight end, all in day 3. Just because that's how he prioritizes things. And that's also why I kind of see, a kicker not getting drafted, but a kicker being in a serious threat to Will Lutz, because he's going to put kicker as a high priority. So I'm going back to the Jim Moore kind of draft. Okay, Jahmyr Gibbs. We talked a little bit about him in the beginning of the show. Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm sorry. We talked a little about the beginning of the show. The problem is where he falls in the draft and where the Saints will be. It's possible to grab him in the second round. I would like for the Saints, if they're going to do that, I'd like for them to trade back and get an extra second or third round pick too, if they do something like that. I don't know if that's possible. I tried looking up trade back. The Saints have only done it, I think, since Loomis has been here, and that was 2003. I think I counted 3 times they traded back. So that's scary. I think he will be there at 40, though, Calvin. I think there's a chance he will be there. just because I don't see running backs flying off the board this year. That's why you want five quarterbacks go in the first round. So we'll see if that happens. Anyway, Bob is now doing the Smoking Man from the X-Files. So it's almost been an hour and a half on this show. There he goes. Now he's Deep Throat from All the President's Men. Totally in shadow. You don't sound like Hal Holbrook, though.
Not yet.
Anyway, thank you guys for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. This was a week where we really didn't have much Saints news. So I'm glad we were able to put a show together for this long. Like I said, next week we'll talk about the other teams, the NFC South. And then the following week, we're going to try and make our predictions for first round, maybe the first 10 picks of the draft. So in the meantime, check out Bob tomorrow night on the Bayou Blitz. And thank you guys. You have a good week.
Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.